we could talk more about the consumer-facing things, but I think physical therapy practices need to get more towards the consumer, more consumer-facing. And that starts with the marketing, the conversations over the phone, which you could arguably call the sales process, putting out more video and content of what's happening in your clinic, in your practice, all that. And then over time, more folks will be more likely to know, like, and trust you and pay out of pocket for whatever your ancillary services might be, as opposed to just calling up and saying, like, do you take my insurance? Kick it.
Welcome to Strata Stories. My name is Thomas Schreiber. I'm Director of Marketing here at Strata. Strata is a single EMR platform and revenue cycle management service for physical, occupational, and speech therapy practices that helps you achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate. On today's episode, Paul Singh, the CEO of Strata, talks with Dave Kittle, PT, and the CEO of the Fieldmaker Group. Paul and Dave talk through offering cash-based services to your clinic, what acquisitions are looking like in 2024, the benefits of owning multiple practices, the future of compensation in the PT and OT world, and lastly, the importance of shifting towards consumer-facing approaches. If you'd like to learn more about Strata and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo. Now, without further delay, here's today's episode.
Speaking to a lot of practices, but also just colleagues, friends that are either doing brick and mortar, maybe they're doing mobile visits, different size practices. I listened to, a lot of your episodes and even Justin's most recent one about the physician referrals, which was awesome, tactical, actionable, all that. It's wild to think with reimbursement where there's the third party payer where reimbursement is not keeping up with inflation. It's not keeping up with cost of living, anything like that. And then you have therapists that come out with student loan debt. This is it's like a broken record. This is something we talked about. We hear about all the time. Therapists come out with a lot of student loan debt. They want to have 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever percent increase in salary or compensation every year, which basically means like you can't retain and keep some of these therapists after a certain point. Either they become partners like a law firm type structure, maybe they buy in, or they kind of get priced out of compensation, which is wild. And then they go maybe work for a hospital setting or some other setting that is not optimal, but maybe pays more. And I think like just say we fast forward 10 years, 20 years from now, whatever it might be, I think paying out of pocket, the whole, whatever you want to call it, the cash-based physical therapy movement, whatever you want to call it, or just people, insurance beneficiaries will have to pay more out of pocket moving forward. And I think the practice owners, and by the way, I have nothing to sell anyone listening. I have no coaching. I have no course, no nothing. But I would say my topic would be kind of around just out of pocket services and having those conversations, getting repetitions and getting practice with presenting potential therapeutic solutions or options to patients that is either not covered by insurance or is reimbursed at a very low rate. I mean, there's some gray area there as to if it's medically necessary or not. But anyway, my burning topic is out-of-pocket expenditures for our physical therapy services, because how else are practices going to grow in the future when their reimbursement is capped?
I love this, man, because, okay, so I, at the risk of maybe losing some listeners and some friends here, I would say that I think you're right. I think that, but the way I would describe what you're saying here is I would say like this happens in every industry. I think that like the best example I can give you is that people don't realize or remember that 30 years ago the New York Stock Exchange used to close every Wednesday along with the weekends, and that's because when you made your order for stock, whatever it was, you called a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy, and eventually a piece of paper went into a little spiky thing in New York, and then eventually on Wednesdays and the weekends they had to flip that thing over and actually process the trades. And so when technology came into play, there was a lot of grinding of teeth, gnashing of teeth, and people were like, oh my gosh, this is going to kill my business, or, it used to be a different way or whatever. But really what technology ended up doing was moving the middleman out. Anybody that wasn't adding value in the chain they got pressured out of the market. And it opened up a lot of possibilities for entrepreneurial brokerage owners. And so anyway, coming back to this industry, I think a lot of people are pointing at the proverbial boogeyman which is, the payer or, the patient or whatever. They're all pointing at this like proverbial boogeyman around the corner. And you can choose to be pessimistic about it and complain and say like, oh my gosh, how am I going to ever run my practice? Or I quit because I'm not going to get another 6% raise. I'm going to go get a job at a hospital. You can do that if you want to be pessimistic. By the way, you're being pessimistic if you use the word they. If you use the word they to describe the problem, like some weird they, what's that?
You're blaming others.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, once you start using the word they, you might as well just admit to yourself, that you're not really looking for a solution. You just kind of want to complain. Meanwhile, the world's going to continue moving forward. I'm an optimist, and I think that what's happening here is that I think what you're saying is probably right. I think that this is going to put more pressure on entrepreneurial practice owners and entrepreneurial clinicians to really think hard about what value they provide to their patients, and then accordingly, what that value might be worth to a patient. And you might interpret that differently. Some people are going to say, let's go super niche. Let's go after marathoners, or let's go after knee replacements, or let's go after a shoulder. You could niche it out that way. You could start to, take consumer tactics and use affiliate links to kind of like goose your revenue. I mean, just by the way, that's an idea I think nobody ever talks about in the practice setting. If you just visited, or if a patient just visited you, presumably you would think that a clinic would send an email, hey, thanks for seeing us, whatever. Most don't, but if they do, then they kind of like leave the most that they probably do is they say, hey, give us a review on Google. That's probably the most they do if they do anything at all. But what if you actually had a drip sequence that said, hey, by the way, here are our favorite products on Amazon. I'm just making this up, right? But like, here's our favorite medicine ball. Here's our favorite whatever. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but the thing about affiliate links like that is that there is residual revenue that you can pick up from that. Now, there's probably better ways to get commission and stuff like that, but my point is just conceptual here.
Just to push back against that, that's like Tony Maritata does some of that, and now it works more when he puts it in his 40,000 member Facebook group. Not every practice has that. Practices have what, I don't know, a couple hundred, couple thousand total patients, and it comes out to tens of dollars, or I don't know, hundreds. I mean, hundreds still really not that meaningful, but I think more of it would be moving forward. I think it's more literally out of the pocket of the patients and consumers and clients that trust your practice. Maybe it's a membership model. Maybe it's out of pocket for ongoing lifestyle changes, whatever.
You're absolutely right, by the way. And I admit, like, my example is probably not the best one. I'm just kind of using it as an example of like the way I think people should be thinking. I mean, people, let's just use grocery stores as an example. On the one hand, if you own a grocery store, you could complain all day that the wholesale price of milk continues to rise and da, 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 da. Alternatively, you can see what most of them have done is jammed more candy into the checkout aisles, right? And what they're really trying to do is move the average cart value up. And over time, if they can move that average cart value up from $72 per transaction to $80, that meaningfully adds up. Now, again, these are just examples. Hopefully, like an entrepreneurial practice owner or clinician here kind of, looks past my words and kind of just grabs onto the idea here that ultimately you've got to start thinking differently about this, So anyway, but yeah, I'm with you though. I think like there's a lot of people out there complaining, especially this time of year. We're recording this at, the first quarter of 2024. Beginning of the year, everybody's saying like they're blaming the boogeyman. Everybody's thinking about reimbursement rates, deductibles, whatever. And so, yeah, that's right. The impending tax bill, all that stuff. And so anyway, I think, but I do think you're right. I think it's going to force, this is going to, again, if I haven't lost any friends yet, this is probably where it's going to happen. I think the reality is that this is kind of the way of every industry. And, to your point of you described the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have to figure something out. I would say the underbelly of that is that over the next 5 to 10 years, the least entrepreneurial minded clinicians and practice owners are going to kind of get filtered out. Which is going to make room for the ones that are thinking entrepreneurially to excel. So we'll see. Well, I'm curious though, by the way, to the extent that you can share without, violating some NDA or something like that. What are you seeing right now in terms of exits? Early part of 2024, just ballpark trends. Anything crazy? Or anything that's like kind of eye opening to you?
No, nothing that's too out of the ordinary. Brick and mortar practices obviously have a little bit lower margins, especially the in network practices have lower margins. And then we've spoken to some that are cash or out of pocket or out of network or some hybrid where maybe they accept Medicare, but then they accept out of network or they're private pay fee for service for all the other payers, and the patients and clients, some percentage of them in that area decide that it's valuable enough and worth it to pay out of pocket, even if they already have some in-network plan. Those practices are few and far between, but those practices have, higher margins, like in the, 20-25% range of profit margins, which is high. And then the in-network practices are around a low, scary 10, 11, 12, 13%. And so I don't know, you can get nervous if your margins are that tight, and then the majority of your actual payers are some plans that ultimately you have minimal to no control over in terms of reimbursement, timeline, reimbursement rates, clawbacks, all that type of stuff. So
Yeah, yeah. Is it? This might be a naive question, but I'll say something, but it's a story for another time. In a past life, so I do a lot of investing in startups and brick and mortar as well. But in a past life, I used to own a bunch of gas stations, and one of the things I learned very quickly about gas stations was that having one gas station is a recipe for disaster. The margins on having just one, it's highly volatile, really depending on geography, lots of swings. Hell, one theft would kill all your margins for the month. And you learn very quickly that like the real money in gas stations is owning 8 to 10 of them. You have economies of scale, you can centralize certain things, and da da da. Is that generally the same for practices? In other words, obviously some sort of like for an average practice owner that owns one practice, there's probably a little bit of volatility to what you just alluded to. But is there sort of a magic number of practices that somebody should consider having or owning in order to like kind of smooth it out? The answer might be no, by the way. I'm just curious.
no, I mean, there is no number. There's no sweet spot. It's just like the larger, the better in a geographical region, because then you could even have simple things like, coverage, like, John that works at the front desk at one office, or maybe there's two front desk people, and then the second or third location, that person has COVID, goes on vacation, gets sick, gets ill, maternity leave, whatever. It's easier to move folks around if you have more locations in a region. You get some of those cost savings, some of those synergies. If you acquire one or two practices and they each have like a physician liaison, like a marketing person, maybe you consolidate that. Maybe you just need the person that you have already at your quote unquote corporate office, and you can save on some of the redundant roles. Although that's not good for some of those folks, but that's just business and that's just how it goes. So there's definitely cost savings. Also, I don't know, you tell me, like if a practice is going to join Strata and they have 5, 7, 10, 15, whatever locations, they might say, hey, we're thinking about switching from one vendor to another vendor, and they might be able to negotiate better rates with you guys because they're bringing more volume. So there's a lot of, and you can do that with more locations for any vendor, right? So for your, I don't know about for your Wi-Fi, but for like your, any of your software licenses, any of your, things like that, you have more leverage. Even for your, medical equipment, physical goods that you're buying, you can buy them in bulk. You can save, you can save there. You can get better rates with potentially with your team members, health insurance or liability or things like that. So it goes on and on in terms of cost savings and synergies.
Right. Actually, in switching gears real quick, I'm sorry for jumping back to that first topic you brought up, that was the one that was bouncing around your head. You talked about, clinicians that quote unquote, kind of air quote here, expect a raise, cost of living raise, da da da. I'm curious, have you seen any interesting compensation models or so when a practice owner thinks about staff retention, obviously the raise is the thing that everybody's going to ask for, right? Hey, I deserve one or whatever. But have you seen anything interesting there in terms of, I don't know, profit sharing, other incentives to, because again, like, you never, as an owner of a business, you never want to be the one that's always saying no, because that's a great way to lose your staff. At the same time, you can't be saying yes all the time, because you kill the margins. Any interesting models you've seen there in terms of profit shares or anything like that, or other ways to boost staff retention?
Yeah, definitely. I have no affiliation to them. I get no kickback or any fee or anything by mentioning them. But there's something called, or a company called Onus One. Um, I've heard some things. I've spoken with one of the founders or one of the members there, and I've heard some stories from different therapists. And so one example initially is most therapists historically, let's say over the past 5, 10, 15, whatever years, like most therapists that are staff therapists, they make a fixed salary, 100% of their compensation is salary. Then we talked about this change with like declining or plateaued reimbursement and increasing cost of living and increasing demands of compensation. So this company Onus One popped up, and the structures can vary depending on like the practice owner and like their desires. And so it's Onus, ONUSONE, Onus One. And one example is I know a therapist from several years ago. Onus One came in, and the practice owner or the executives decided to use Onus One, and the practice owners chose a 50-50 split. So 50% was guaranteed salary, and then the other 50% was based off of productivity. And it was, I mean, most likely tied to units. I think they might have said like, visits per day, but that's assuming the visits were being billed at 3 point whatever units, or 3.3 or 3.5 or 3.7 units per visit or whatever. You could tie it to units because of the billable time for physical therapy. So there would be like a weekly quota, and it's on average, right? You have to kind of average it out because therapists go on vacation, they get sick, get COVID, whatever. But half of your compensation would be tied to billable units in the medical record, and then your compensation would 50% tied to that, and then 50% was whatever your guaranteed salary was before. Now, I've heard pros and cons. I've heard good and bad. Again, I can talk neutrally about this because I have no stake in the game. So I've heard some practices, some therapists, where they brought in Onus One or something like it, and no therapists left. They adapted to it. The owners, executives, management team, whoever, they most likely communicated it well. And then I also heard stories where Onus One was brought into a particular location or practice, and over the next several months to a year, every or most of the therapists left. Now, what I think that goes back to is culture, who you have there, and also how you communicate it and how you kind of roll it out and manage it and all that. So there's a lot of components to it. But I do think, although there's some challenges with it, it does make a little bit more sense. It's kind of like a law firm model where you can go from, junior or a junior associate to eventually like a senior associate or senior partner or whatever. And that in a law firm is typically based off of your billable hours plus your overall performance and results and all that. So that is something that I think can or continue to happen in physical therapy, assuming you're going to stay in the same insurance reimbursement payer model.
Yeah. It's super interesting. I mean, I there's probably not enough time in the show to for me to explain this, but I'll just go out on a limb and just say that what I think is happening in the, let's just call it the broad PTOT sort of practice ownership right now. I think what's happening in this whole industry kind of looks like what happened in the tech sector about 20 years ago. Again, we won't talk about the details of it yet here, but the summary or the high level gist of that is that 20 years ago, tech companies kind of looked a lot of like practices today, and over time they had to figure out how to incentivize their best performers, align incentives to make sure that everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction, discourage people that aren't really adding value to the firm. And today, it's pretty sophisticated in terms of stock option plans, bonuses, profit shares, all sorts of crazy stuff like that, which is normal now. And what you're just describing, and kind of like what I've been hearing from more and more of the the pretty successful business owners out in this industry, is that they're they may or may not know it, but they're kind of talking a lot the same way as the tech sector was about 20 years ago. Now, I don't think it'll take 20 years to get it, to get it to advance, just because there's more information available. Like you're talking about this publicly, others are too. But I don't think it's going to take 20 years. I don't think it'll happen. I don't think it'll get fixed in like a year. But I like what you said at the beginning of the show. That 5 to 10 year timeline is probably like a good time frame. It's going to wash out anybody that isn't committed to the industry, and it's also going to create a lot of opportunity for the most entrepreneurial ones.
And maybe there's no big difference between the next 5 and 10 years, but it might be a slow degrade on your profit margins if you don't think about something. That's why I mentioned, like, hey, the topic that's on the top of my mind is presenting more out-of-pocket private pay options for patients and clients for either physical therapy or wellness, performance, like not medically necessary services. Unfortunately, like, it is what it is. We have these insurance companies that are making record profits. They're putting up more and more red tape and hurdles and more clawbacks, and even the beneficiaries. The premiums are higher, the copays are higher, the deductibles are higher. Consumers are already paying more and more out of pocket. I know this is not for everyone. I know that there's some folks that truly don't have resources, financial resources, or a budget to pay out of pocket. I understand that. That's why our government has things like the social safety nets and things like that. So unfortunately, it's not for everyone. But I think physical therapy practices need to continue to become more and more like the consumer-facing companies that Paul kind of talks about, because historically they've just relied on physician referrals and this insurance model that it's like someone calls up and they're like, do you take my insurance? And they're like, yeah. And then, some percentage of those people book and show up, and then some fall off and some stay. And there's not a real affinity for that service or that practice, as opposed to if you're ponying up more money, you have more of an affinity, you have more of a connection. We could talk more about the consumer-facing things, but I think physical therapy practices need to get back to, or I don't think they've ever been there, actually, more towards the consumer, more consumer-facing. And that starts with the marketing, the conversations over the phone, which you could arguably call the sales process, putting out more video and content of what's happening in your clinic, in your practice, all that. And then over time, more folks will be more likely to know, like, and trust you and pay out of pocket for whatever your ancillary services might be, as opposed to just calling up and saying, like, do you take my insurance? And they have nothing. And they ask that question, by the way, because they have nothing else to compare it to. They're just like, they not, that's like what their parents would say when they called their doctors when, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever years ago. It's just something that's just in place. And this is like a new era. And I think we have to embrace it. The only way to, I don't want to say the only way, but one of the best ways to sleep better at night and grow a physical therapy practice is to have more services, more options that are out of pocket. You get the cash sooner into your bank account. You usually get more, or like compared to whatever, like reimbursement. Medicare might pay in 14 days. Other payers are paying in 3 weeks, 3 months, who knows when, right? And then someone who pays out of pocket for, if Thomas or you pay out of pocket for a service, if you guys were in the New York City area, you pay out of pocket, it hits my bank account sooner in days. And then as long as I do right by you, as long as you love the experience and all that, you're not going to charge back on the card. You're not going to have a dispute on the credit card. You're not going to claw back that money. And so, boom, like, I get that money, the revenue, the profit sooner. It hits my bank account faster than reimbursement. I know it's not going to be like 100% of your revenue, but that's the thing that is really burning in my brain. Like, I don't, like, other than the Medicaids and the Medicares and all that, like, moving forward, these payers are making it more and more challenging for practice owners, and something's got to change.
Well, and the reality is, look, I think anybody listening here, I'll just kind of preface this by saying, obviously, you didn't come here for for mental therapy or whatever, right? But at the same time, it's like, look, if you look at these payers, the reality is it's not ever going to get better. Like, we can talk all day about, like, something's got to change, and but that's a political issue, and it's way above your pay grade, my pay grade, and frankly the pay grade of any practice owner. I mean, we can talk about politics all day, different show, different time, but the reality is there's things we can control, things we can't control. What the payer's going to pay, you can't control. we can complain about it. You can write letters to whoever you want, but the reality is that it's staring you down the barrel. You know which way it's going to go. So the reality is you kind of have to, like, buckle up, grab the bootstraps, and start asking yourself, what are you going to do about it? And to your point, there's not any only way, but there's certainly a bunch of different paths forward that people should be thinking about. Whether it's, well, anyway, we could go on that for a while, but yeah, I mean, I think, I'm just an optimist. I mean, you could punch me in the face and I'd be like, oh, he tripped. It's not a big deal. We'd all be friends about it. So the thing about it is, when I think about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial thinking, both at the clinician level and the owner level, I just see opportunity, and the reality is that, like, if you're one of those people that's like, man, it used to be a different way or whatever, I got bad news for you. Because I love what you said there a minute ago too. You said something along the lines of, like, it's, you mentioned, I forget exactly the context of it, but you talked about how it's going to just, your margins and your revenue are going to just kind of drop off slowly over time. It's not going to be like some waterfall that hits. And like, what's also true along with that is that your patient demographics are going to start to, slowly change as well. I'm 42. Eventually I'm going to be coming into the Medicare population, and the reality is that my generation expects something different. We expect, I may not want to call, I may value what you just said there better in terms of, like, I don't even want to deal with insurance. I'd rather just pay you, like, the point is that change is constant, and you just kind of have to think about it. One of the mental frameworks I like to think about, not only in the context of Strata, but even when I'm sort of investing in other businesses, I have this, like, 3-pronged framework that I think about where it's like, what would this business, whatever we're talking about, brick and mortar practice, whatever, what would this business look like if, number one, it started with a deep understanding of today's customer, how they think, what they watch, what tools they use, that sort of thing. Number two, what would this business look like if it had a deep understanding of today's technology? And number three, what would this business look like if it started today with no legacy baggage? Nothing to worry about of, like, how things were done in the last 3 years, 10 years, 30 years. What would that look like today? Anyway, those are, and then that, like, bleeds into then tactics, like retargeting and all this stuff that's available today that never used to be available to business owners 5 years ago. So I'll just put a little teaser in here, right? It's like, we've all had that experience where we were talking about something with our friends, and then magically an Amazon ad showed up on our Facebook feed for that very product. That's not accidental, and that's also not magic. That's the kind of thing that's available to any practice owner for pennies a month, not dollars, hundreds or thousands, pennies a month. But that's what I mean by, like, what's available today.
So here's an example, right? So, like, when I was a little bit younger, I mean, I know I'm still pretty young, but, like, when I, had more, like, I had student loan debt, and I was, really choosy about where I was spending my money, like with travel, for example, I would use Airbnb. And, that just was like, it just made sense. It was different. It felt cool. And then I started having issues with Airbnb. Went to San Francisco. The first night I was there, try to go to sleep at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, whatever. And the host that we're like in the basement or like the street level, and then the host owns the whole house or whatever. And then their dog is going crazy, running back and forth across the ceiling, and disturbing my sleep. And that's like the first night of visiting San Francisco, and I'm like, great, like, I several, I think 3-4 nights or something, like, this is how it's going to be. And then, like, used Airbnb in Rome, and my clothes are all wrinkled, and I want to iron my clothes and before I go out, and couldn't find the iron. And there's like multiple, I don't know, in Europe there's like multiple little Airbnb rooms in like one apartment, and like had to WhatsApp the host to go down the hallway, find a key behind something, and then use a key, go into like their like laundry room, and pull out this iron that apparently when you book it, it says an iron is included in the room, but really it's like, it's communal. Someone else could have had it. And also it's like your janitor's closet, whatever. Right. So my point of this is, eventually I got fed up with this, and I'm like, I'm back to hotels, baby. I'm back to hotels, Hilton, Marriott, whatever it might be. I'm back to hotels. I love the certainty, the assurance, the confidence of me going in there. I know what to expect. I'm not going to have a dog running up above my ceiling or the room above me to disturb my sleep. And every room that I go to with Marriott or Hilton or wherever, it's going to have a hair dryer, an iron, maybe a bottle of water, and maybe ideally a gym so I can work out. So I get that amenity, and maybe a continental breakfast or some, bananas or whatever, this and that. Uh, there's certainty, and you pay for that. You pay for certainty, the assurance. You pay for some of those things to have a different experience. That's my same analogy for physical therapy and healthcare. With our services, you can pay for certainty, confidence, experience, a specialist, an expert, whatever you want to call it. And some folk, like, this is not for everyone. Some folks are going to stay with the Airbnb analogy for their physical therapy for their whole lives. Some people are going to go, and they're going to go to that busy mill factory where a therapist is treating 5 or 6 patients an hour. Some people are going to get turned off on that, and then they're going to find my practice or another practice on Google, and they're going to say, oh, you guys do like one-on-one visits, and oh, now it makes sense why you guys charge 150, 250, 350, whatever per visit.
Right. This is, man, I love the way you're talking about that. And by the way, I feel like I have a similar story about Airbnb. Like, when it first came out, I'm like, oh man, this is so cool. Let's try it, And when I was like younger, single, no kids, like, it was cool. Except, and even when the water heater broke, it didn't really matter. You're young and you don't care. Now, I'm not old. I don't feel old, but at 42, I got a bunch of kids and a wife and all that. And like, frankly, I love the consistency of a Marriott or Hyatt. And I particularly like when things go wrong too. Like, I don't have to worry about the shower being broken. They just fix it. But what you're talking about, I think, when you invest in a lot of companies over the years, you pick up some heuristics. And one of the common red flags I'll pick up is I'll ask a question like, who's your customer? And they'll typically say like, anyone that has some blah, blah, blah. Anyone, right there. That's the red flag. Anyone with a pulse. They don't mean it that way, but that's kind of what it sounds like. And I think that, I don't know how to articulate this clearly, but the point is that, let's go back to that Airbnb and Marriott analogy for just a second. You can choose to believe that Airbnb and Marriott, for example, are competitors, which, by the way, I think is wrong. Or you can recognize the fact that they serve two very different demographics that are both willing to pay a premium for that. So Airbnb is not cheap. It's actually arguably more expensive when you look at all the hidden fees than Marriott, but it serves a certain clientele that would rather stay in a neighborhood or something like that. That's not me, but that's clearly enough people to justify the valuations that they have on the markets right now. So coming back to like practices, I think what this industry needs is more opinionated practice owners that can clearly define a persona that they serve, and then try to reject and repel anybody that's not in that persona. Like, for example, here in Northern Virginia, I don't have any affiliation with it, but I won't mention its name anyway. But there's a new chain of there's a local guy here that owns like a fast growing chain of PT practices, highly targeting athletes. Just, I mean, if you look at like the marketing of it, even the fixtures, I've driven by the place, I've walked in and kind of secret shopped it as well. Everything is designed for an athlete, but the reality is that there's this many people. I'll just use an analogy here, and I'll get people hate me for it. There's this many people that are actually good at football, and this many people that love the idea of playing football, professionally or in a league or whatever. And this particular chain here in the DC area, we sit between the Baltimore Ravens, the Washington Commanders, and you got all these soccer teams and hockey teams and all this stuff, basketball teams. This entire chain is not built for the players that are making millions of dollars. It looks like it is, but it's targeting professional white collar people that happen to work out and are willing to do cash pay. And you're buying, $500 chunks of treatment, not for feeling better, but to perform better, and then, like, anyway, my point is simply that, like, I love what you're saying there. And I think this is the part that's going to make people uncomfortable, is that, if you build a practice that caters to anyone, you really shouldn't be surprised when no one is really showing up.
There's going to be folks listening and watching this that will push back, and it arguably, yes, it could be harder to grow. It could be harder to expand to multiple practices. There's also on the private equity side, there's, corporate buyers that actually they want practices to stay in network because it already matches their model of other practices that they already own or co-own. And so the out of pocket, the hybrid, the cash pay, whatever you want to call it, that whole world, it is still kind of like an oddball. It is different. However, you can sleep a lot better at night. You have more control over your compensation. I'm sorry, you have more control over your revenue and your profits. By adding some of these, and because we were talking about salaries and compensation and cost of living demands and all that type of stuff by your staff. If you add in some of these things, so whether it's shockwave, stim pod, laser, decompression, or even if it's like remote programming, where like Paul runs a lot, so you could have a physical therapist locally to you that, and I don't know if you would want this, but like they would, let's say you had a plan of care, you had some running injury, and then they write a digital program for you. There's apps out there like True Coach and other apps. They write a program for you for like the next 3 to 6 months. And it's like exactly your week by week workout based off of the equipment that you have, based off your goals, whatever. It's completely out of pocket. I mean, I've paid a physical therapist, like $1,000 for one of these programs, at least a couple times. So I spent a couple thousand where when I go to work out, I have a certain amount of equipment. He knows what equipment I have, my goals, whatever. And here's the exact exercises, the exact reps. And then I plug in what weights I used and how I felt. And then the physical therapist changes the plan. He'll adjust it. He'll say, oh, maybe we need to do more of this. Maybe we need to step back and do less of this, whatever. And that's completely out of pocket. Now, I know someone watching or listening, if they live in some other, rural area, whatever, maybe your folks don't have the discretionary income for that. You could charge, I don't know, 100, 250, whatever. But it's a digital program. It's almost like a home exercise program, but moving forward, like it's a longer view program. You can adjust it and change it digitally. And it's something that is valuable to the consumer. It's not going to be valuable to everyone, but someone like Paul, who's a runner, if you keep someone like Paul healthy and pain-free, and stay, because runners hate rehab and runners hate strengthening and runners, don't want to be banged up. So someone like Paul as a runner will potentially pay out of pocket for a remote programming service, and it substitutes or it helps to subsidize your insurance reimbursement, and it can help you retain staff longer, because if you have some of these other cash pay services, you can potentially have more cash to pay your therapist and keep some of the top performers in your practice longer instead of them leaving for the hospital or some other job.
Yep. I think, like, by the way, it's interesting. And by the way, I agree completely. I think it's interesting because, and I'll just use myself as an example. I, like a normal human being, am not going to pay for that. I'm going to pay for I'm justifying in my head for the perceived outcome of that. Does that make sense? And this is like a common challenge that I see with entrepreneurs, regardless of, again, industry, whether it's owning a practice or owning a software company. They kind of like accidentally assume that the customer is like them, and it's not. Like, I think it's all about outcomes. Like, we can all pretend to be like super smart people that have gone to school and want to do the right things, but if we're honest with ourselves, we've all spent some money on something that other people would call stupid. And it's because, like, you don't make purchase decisions on rational, like, it would be rational for me to keep the same iPhone until the thing doesn't turn on anymore. But emotionally, I'm like, a new one just came out. I'm going to just hit the button. Rationally, people shouldn't go wait for a PlayStation 5 at Best Buy. I don't even know what the latest one is, but some subset of people will camp out for days, and so, like, we can choose to make fun of it, because maybe it is a little funny. Or as a business owner, we could ask ourselves, like, what is that methodology? What is that thinking that's behind them? Because, again, if you understand the hopes, fears, and dreams of a patient better than they can actually describe, you win. And by the way, notice here, hopes, fears, and dreams, not actually what's wrong with them. That's just table stakes. Like if you're in this industry, you kind of have to know, like you don't even get in this industry if you don't know what's wrong with them and how to fix it. But if you truly take the time to understand what their hopes, fears, and dreams are, now everything changes. So like and I'm making this up, right? I'm 42 now, and rationally, I don't want to run every day. I'm a runner. I don't rationally want to get out of bed every day at 5 and go run. But the reason I do it is because at 42 with 4 kids, I don't want to do that dad grunt when I get off the couch. That's the emotional reason I do it. And so anybody that can then keep me healthy and all that, and actually repeats those words back to me, man, all of a sudden, like that trust, that, the wallet opens up. Take my money. Just, I want to be around my kids. Sell me that. Oh, you want a link to my iPhone? You want a link to my Apple Fitness Health and get all my data? Those are tactical. That's cool, right? Anyway, I'm saying the same thing as you. I wish more people were thinking like this. The other thing I'll just say, and I'm curious if you would push back, or go ahead. No, go ahead.
The dad grunt, you avoiding that, Paul. Why is that important to you?
For me, you mean as a patient or as a individual, or what do you?
Let's say if you were a fake patient.
Yeah, I really want to be involved with my kids. So for me, my mom and dad were immigrants. They did the classic immigrant thing, had to work 2 jobs each and that sort of thing. So they were never really able to be around to throw a ball or, like they did as much as they could, but they couldn't do, some stuff. And I want something different for my kids. I'm in a good position to be able to do that. I want to be able to like go kick a soccer ball around and not be, breathless. For me, it's about like, my youngest is 15 months old. My oldest is 10. And so I'm at that point of, life right now where there's a lot of chasing, there's a lot of carrying, there's a lot of throwing, a lot of kicking, and I just want to be part of it. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen, so that would be my answer there.
Got it. So if I were your physical therapist, I would simply like repeat back some of those words like, oh, Paul, okay. So it sounds like it's important to you to be there and involved with your kids. Cause I know you have 3 kids and they're adolescents. So you want to be there for their growth as they continue to mature. And that's important to you to be there with them moving forward. Right. You're a few visits away from, we're going to graduate this plan of care, this quote unquote running injury that we're kind of just making up on the fly without saying any anatomy or anything. And then, I don't know if this is going to be right for you or not, Paul, but like we have this health and longevity plan that is XYZ time duration, dollar amount, or whatever to track your workouts, track your fitness and your health. And here's what it would look like. I don't know if it's right for you. You could take a look and maybe it could assist you long-term with your goals. Now, if we didn't want to talk about that, we could just say, so you're a runner. And if you have, Paul, do you have a race coming up? Like, do you have any race that's you're registered for?
Yeah, I got a 10-miler coming up in about a month.
In about a month, right? So there's like another example. Let's say you had some patient that you reactivated. I haven't talked to Paul in a while. Hey, Paul, how you doing? You had some old injury, whatever, and now you have something in a month. That could be another reason. Like, oh, you're not like, you don't have like acute pain, but you said that you're banged up or you're feeling sore, this, that, and the other. How about this? We have this option. It's out of pocket, but it's a digital program for the next month leading up to your next race. We could lay out some daily exercises, stretches, some tips, recovery, wellness, hydration, sleep, whatever strategies. It's going to be all in this app. And it could potentially help you have a higher likelihood to be totally fresh, refreshed, and ready for that next race.
Man, I love it. I would say, like, just as a little bit, I love this role play. I would just say, I would push back and say, I don't care whether it's an app, a piece of paper, a PDF, a text message, but the outcome, I want that. Yeah, no, absolutely. I want that. Like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. Because the reality is like, I'm self-trained. I'm and I'm not trying to be like world class. By the way, totally random. The Olympic trials for the marathon just happened a couple days ago from this recording. The most interesting part is the 4th place finisher in the women's category at like under 2.5 hours for the marathon has no coach, no sponsors. She just trains in her basement. That's incredible to me that's where we are right now. But yeah, absolutely. And I think the only reason I tell you that is that, like, I think a lot of business owners that even get this far in their thinking in this role play, they get hung up on how to do it. Like, you don't have to have an app. You don't have to have those are nice to haves, but they're not. It's not the, like, in the world I come from, we call it the MVP. What's the minimum viable product? In this example, what you're selling me is my desire for just you telling me what to do, and I don't care whether that's delivered via PDF, a text that you scheduled every, at 6 a.m. or whatever. So don't, yeah.
Also some accountability, right? So you just gave the example of the Olympic runner or athlete. That individual is probably a freak of nature. You, Paul, you run a lot, and you might not even need this because you already have some internal motivation. You obviously care about your health and wellness and all that. But most people need accountability. Most people need to not just be told what to do, but like when, and have some oversight. So when I was doing this remote programming on this True Coach app, the physical therapist that I have known for years, and I also paid him out of pocket for it, Mike Laviolette, if I don't check off the exercises from last night or the night before, whatever, inside the app, he can see that. He'll log in on a daily or weekly basis, and he'll message me and say, hey, Dave, I saw that you didn't log your workouts. Did you just forget to log the workouts, or do you have any ache or pain or whatever? So just a little bit of that remote digital oversight, a little bit of accountability that the consumer has to pay for, because now it's your therapist or your PTA, or you could have a front desk person do this or whatever. That accountability, most people, the masses, most people would benefit from that. They get better results. Tony Maritato made a video about My Body Tutor. He interviewed the founder, and that is literally it's someone pays for weekly calls with a health coach about whatever their goals are. And there's like 3 tiers, and it depends on how many daily or weekly calls. Is it three calls a week, or is it like 1 call a day? And then there's like different tiers for that. And that's something that physical therapists can adopt, because again, we're just helping with behavior change and changing, behavior modification and behavior change, which for a lot of people takes accountability. Someone like you or that Olympic runner, they might not need this, but a lot of people will need the accountability.
It's interesting you say that, by the way. And I don't know the guys from My Body Tutor, but interestingly enough, I've heard about them for years now because of, a lot of the founders in my portfolio actually use them. One thing that I'll just kind of point out, just on a random note here, is that a lot of times people look at other entrepreneurs and implicitly kind of treat them as if it was an overnight success. In other words, like, you look at My Body Tutor today, and it must feel overwhelming as another practice owner to think, gosh, how could I have that level of success? So one little trick or tactic there's a little website called the Wayback Machine. So if you ever Google it, the Wayback Machine, or thewaybackmachine.com, it basically takes screenshots of people's websites, every month and all that. So anyway, I like to tell people, like, in this context, go to go to the Wayback Machine and look up My Body Tutor, and now scroll back in the pictures, because what they look like today, super put together, 3 plans and prices and lots of success. It didn't start out that way. And I think it's important to just be okay with, like, what version 1 looks like. Because my anecdotal recollection of this is that I remember, so I think the original founder or something is based in Texas, maybe Austin or something like that. And anecdotally, I remember hearing about them for the first time 10 or 12 years ago from a couple founders I'd invested in down there. And as I recall, at the time, the advice or whatever, the accountability was really just a text message. You were texting the guy. Today, it's probably more sophisticated. But anyway, anyway, I think, I'm glad you mentioned that one, because I think it's a good example of, like, somebody that's embraced consumer tactics to grow their business. It's no longer limited geographically to wherever the founder was or is or whatever. So, anyway, hopefully there's some takeaways for practice owners here as well. I want to be respectful of your time here. Let me pause here, unless you've got any other things. I love that you're open to sharing some of the stuff you're riffing on in your head already.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the out of pocket, cash pay options, I think that's more of an important topic. I think the buying and the selling and the mergers and acquisitions and valuations and all that, like, it's a smaller subset. practice owners that are, earlier in their career or midway in their career. They're not even thinking about partnering or exiting or valuations or anything. But in terms of like the global market forces around outpatient physical therapy. So outpatient in a brick and mortar office or outpatient PT in the home, mobile concierge, whatever. I think the cash pay out of pocket services will continue to be like one of the most prominent issues. It's not for everyone, and it's not for every clinic. It's not for every patient or consumer. But I think that is something that we should and can continue to talk about and just share resources like here's what works for us. And I mean, there's other practices that are, I was just speaking to a practice owner in Connecticut last night over messaging, and he charges, depending on the package, it comes out to $375 to $475 per visit. Now, he's a solo practice owner, which is hard to kind of replace yourself. So there are some issues and challenges around if you're super high scale, fee for service, you got to have some team members. You got to be able to, all that. But I think anyway, the private pay, out of pocket, cash based physical therapy conversation is super important for every practice owner out there.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Strata Stories. Strata is a single EMR platform and a revenue cycle management service for physical, occupational, and speech therapy practices that helps you achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate. If you'd like to learn more about Strata and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo.